Perfect. Thanks. There we go. Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you. Okay. Thank you, everyone. I'd like to call this September 27th, 2021 public hearing to order and begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather tonight is the traditional unceded territory of the Kitsi, Kwantlen, Maspi, and Semiahmoo First Nations. I'm Mayor Val Vandenbroek, and with me tonight, I have Councillor Paul Albrecht, Councillor Terry James, Councillor Gayle Martin will be joining us shortly, Councillor Nathan Pahal, I believe Councillor Rudy Storterboom will be joining us shortly, and Councillor Rosemary Wallace. And staff tonight as well, we have Mr. Chung, our Chief Administrative Officer, Darren Light, our Director of Corporate Services, Carl Johansson, our Director of Development Services, Rick Baumhoff, our Director of Engineering, Parks and Environment, Kim Hilton, our Director of Recreation, Culture and Community Services, Kelly Kenny, our Corporate Officer. And so this public hearing is being convened pursuant to Section 464 of the Local Government Act in order to consider 4 bylaws. Bylaw 3179, Official Community Plan Amendment number 17, a bylaw to amend the City of Langley Official Community Plan bylaw in order to designate the properties located at 5324, 5326, 5334, and 5336 198th Street low-rise residential with additional policy in Appendix A, Nikomaco River District Neighborhood Plan that limits the properties to ground-oriented residential. And Bylaw 3180, Zoning Amendment RZ 02-21 and Development Permit number 0321, a bylaw to rezone properties located at 5324, 5326, 5334, and 5336 198th Street from RS1 single family residential zone to CD77 comprehensive development zone to accommodate a 13-unit townhouse development. I would like to take this opportunity to thank everyone for attending this public hearing, which is taking place by electronic means via Zoom. If we encounter technical challenges during the meeting, please stand by as we want to ensure that everyone who wishes to speak is afforded the opportunity to do so. This public hearing is being live streamed on the city's YouTube channel and is also being recorded and will be posted on the city's website. If you are watching and wish to join and wish to attend this electronic meeting, you can go to langleycity.ca to register and join the meeting. At this public hearing, those in attendance at this meeting who believe that their interest in property is affected by the proposed bylaws will be allowed to make representations to council and shall be given a reasonable opportunity to be heard respecting matters contained in the bylaws. Once in the meeting, you may use the raise hand function to indicate your wish to speak, which will automatically put you in the speaker queue. You will be invited to speak in the order in which the hands are raised. When it is your turn to speak, staff will prompt you with a message asking you to unmute your microphone and you may begin speaking. Please commence your comments to council by clearly stating your name and street address. Unit numbers are not required. Then you may give us the benefit of your views concerning the bylaws. Your name, address, and comments will form part of the record of this public hearing. Members of council may, if they wish, ask questions of you following your presentation. However, the main function of council members this evening is to listen to the views of the public. It is not the function of council at this public hearing to debate the merits of the proposed bylaws with individual citizens. Once you have completed your comments, staff will mute your microphone. Everyone shall be given a reasonable opportunity to be heard at this meeting. No one will be or should feel discouraged or prevented from making their views heard. Once everyone who wishes to speak has done so, I will call for speakers for a second time, at which time those who wish to speak again should indicate so by using the raise hand function again. I will then call for speakers for a third and final time. If there are no speakers, I will ask for a motion to close the public hearing. The public was also given the opportunity to provide written submissions for this public hearing. All submissions will be retained by the corporate officer, and copies of the submissions will be available from her on request following the hearing and shall form part of the public record of these proceedings. Ms. Kenny, can you please advise how notification was provided for this public hearing and whether we have received any correspondence?
Yes, Madam Mayor. Two newspaper advertisements for bylaws 3179 and 3180 were placed in the September 16th and 23rd editions of the Langley Advance Times, and notices were mailed out to owners within 100 meters of the subject properties. A notice of the public hearing was also placed on the city's website and on the posting board on the first floor at City Hall. And we've received 6 pieces of correspondence, which include a petition with 103 names, and which was received in relation to bylaw number 3179 and 3180, and 2 of which were included in the agenda package, and 4 were received after the agenda was published, and so were circulated to council via email.
Great, thank you. Okay, bylaw 3179, official community plan amendment number 17. I believe Mr. Johansson, can you please provide an overview of the purpose of the bylaw?
Yes, thank you, and good evening, Mayor and Council. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, so this official community plan or OCP amendment application is being brought forward in conjunction with the proposed rezoning application for a 13-unit townhouse project. In order to enable this application to proceed prior to the adoption of the new draft OCP, which is expected to occur in November of this year. An OCP amendment is necessary at this point, as the application is within an area currently designated low density residential in the current in effect OCP, which would enable a maximum density of 11.7 units on this site, theoretically 12 units, practically 11 units on the site. The proposed new land use is low-rise residential, consistent with the new OCP and the Nicomeco River District Neighborhood Plan, which, if adopted by council, would enable townhouse projects, ground-oriented projects of a maximum density of 1.2 floor area ratio or FAR, which in this case yields a unit count of 13, which exceeds the current OCP density. And just as a side note, the new OCP is utilizing floor area ratio or FAR to measure density in all zones relative to the current OCP. And a quick rule of thumb with that is that if you have an FAR of 1 on the site, that means you can build floor space on that site that's equivalent to the size of that site or the size of the lot. So if the FAR is 1.2, the floor space you can build on that site is equivalent to 1.2 times the size of that lot. So just to provide that clarification for the members of our audience tonight. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. Ms. Kusack, can you please advise if there's anyone in attendance electronically at this meeting who wishes to speak to bylaw 3179?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There are 8 members of the public in attendance. 1, 2, 3, they're adding up to speak. So yes, we have speakers. I can go ahead and let the first one go if you like.
Yes, please. I'm just looking at my list and I don't see them here. So
okay. Ms. Hanawalt, would you like to present? Please start with your address.
Sure, it's Sandy Hanawalt, and it's 5229 197 A Street, Langley. Good evening, everyone. The Vancouver Sun had an article on August 12th highlighting the worst areas to live in Metro Vancouver for what they describe as heat island effect. Langley City is named throughout the article as one of the 5 worst areas, with too much heat absorbing materials like concrete, asphalt roads, and parking lots. Those areas absorb and store heat, raising temperatures far above the surrounding neighborhoods. The solution, they say, is more tree cover, more green space. I was not very proud of being a resident of Langley City after reading that article. Now, this is important when we look at what's happening with new development in the city. I know we need more housing options for people, but it doesn't seem like the environmental needs are really being considered thoughtfully. Maybe you think this is just one lot, one project, but no, the houses all along 198th Street and 53rd Avenue are already bought by developers who are just waiting to see what happens here first so they can follow. The new OCP, which is quite an accomplished document, highlights the importance of the environment. The pictures in it show housing with lovely tree cover and spread out spaces. However, when you actually see one of the large townhouse development the city approved last year near 198th Street and 55 Avenue, right down the block from this development, approximately 90% of the area is covered by concrete and building materials. It doesn't look anything like the OCP pictures. The OCP seems to be an ideal, but reality looks different. As neighbors of the project you are considering tonight, we are concerned about what is happening with green space, yet you look again at covering about 90% of this property with concrete asphalt building materials. According to the planning department report, this project is requesting changes to the 3-meter road setbacks. These setbacks measurements are proposed under the draft of the new zoning bylaw. The report says this is partly because the drive aisle needs to be 8 meters for fire safety, which is not an option to reduce. The developers should have known this and not be given leeway now because of the size of the roadway. Only 50% of the property on 53rd Avenue meets the 3-meter setbacks and 75% on 198th Street, according to the planning department report. Some building corners are at 2-meter setbacks. This developer is trying to put too many units of housing on this property. If the number of units are reduced, the green space is increased and the setbacks can be maintained. If you allow this project to go through with this much accommodation, every other developer deserves the same. Make this developer work within the guidelines and reduce the housing units on this property. Also in the report from the planning department, it says there's plans to widen 198th Street with a 1-meter property dedication along the frontage there. That makes this property even closer to the street. And once the road widens, more green space or a tree strip by the sidewalk is lost. Ideally, what would neighbors like? Well, we did a survey petition, which you received a copy of, which we completed in April, trying to let the planning department know we were opposed to 13 units. 3 people took an hour to gather signatures, and considering it was during COVID and we had to go door to door, we thought we did good in gathering 100 signatures from areas all around this property. We would like the zoning to remain as is now to allow 2-level townhouses and a reasonable amount of townhouses. We need housing, but we also need to follow some of the basic concepts of the OCP other than just density. The OCP talks about the environment, which I covered, blending into the neighborhood, and a step approach from the road. 2-level townhouses would set the pattern for development all along 198th Street and 53rd Avenue to blend into our neighborhood of single-family houses and duplexes. And a step approach could happen if taller buildings were allowed further back in the area behind us. Finally, as a closing mark and as a minimum, we would like this project to be sent back to the developer so that 100% of the road setbacks can be followed. By doing this, you'll promote more green space and reduce the heat island effect for our city and our future. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much for those comments and concerns, Mrs. Hanawalt. Okay, Ms. Kusack, is there anyone else, next person in attendance who'd like to?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Melnick, please go ahead and start with your street address, please.
Hi, it's Jason Melnick. I'm at 19810 53A Avenue. I wanted to speak, I mean, what Sandy said is excellent recommendations, and I'm all for it. I'm right now looking at page 9 on the shadow study. Our property will be most affected by this development. And if I wish there was more shadow study in here because there's simply not enough to show how we're going to be affected. But if you look at March, by 3 o'clock in the afternoon, over half of our property from the back of our house to the end of our yard will be completely shadowed by this development. I fail to see how I could have anything positive to say about this. I mean, it's literally going to be putting me in a shadow and affecting everything that I grow in our backyard. We have vegetable gardens, we have apple trees, we spend a lot of time outside. So I really think that the size of this property is not conducive to where they're putting it. 3 stories is going to affect me greatly. I don't know what else I could say possibly that would impact this, except get me some more shadow studies. I mean, let's see what it's going to be like at 4 o'clock in the afternoon when my yard is completely in a shadow. I don't think anybody would like that. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Melnick. I believe Ms. Schellenberg is next, please, and state your name and your address.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Leslie Schellenberg, and I live at 5311 198A Street. Our residence backs directly onto this proposed development. We have lived here for over 20 years, and as you can imagine, we are not thrilled with any development like this in our backyard, but we have come to accept the fact that this is what will be happening. I would like to address one of my main concerns tonight as being the lack of parking. This complex is designed with tandem garages, and as I'm sure everyone is aware, tandem garages are a great concept, but rarely function as planned. We know that one vehicle will park in these garages with the remainder used as storage or converted into additional living space. Most of us in the neighborhood don't even park tandem in our own driveways. Knowing that most of these units will only be parking one of their 2 vehicles in the garages, my question is, where will the other 13 vehicles park? Currently, there is no street parking on 198th Street fronting this project. Is this going to be changed? 198th Street north of 53rd Avenue daily is jam-packed with vehicles that I'm sure belong to residents living in the existing townhouses on 198th Street. With the proposed lane access onto 53rd Avenue, I am assuming that the limited amount in parking on the north side of 53rd, east of the 4-way stop at 198th Street, will be even further reduced. Street parking on 53rd Avenue east of 198th Street is full on a regular basis with people walking the nature trails around Bryden Lagoon and the floodplain. On the other side of 198th Street, the parking is quite often full of cars with families playing at the playground at Bryden Park. As you are aware, there is another 30-unit townhouse development in the application process right next door to this 13-unit development. Where are the potential additional vehicles from this development going to park? That is potentially 28 vehicles driving around trying to find somewhere to park daily. I believe that the city needs to look at where all these new residents and their visitors in our neighborhood are going to park. We're not going to be a car-free community and transit dependent within the next 5 years, especially now since the SkyTrain extension has already been delayed. I respectfully request that all parties review the parking design for this townhouse complex and future ones. More usable on-site parking, double garages instead of tandem, or possibly resident-only permit parking on our neighborhood streets. Thank you for your time.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Schellenberg, for your comments. Rhianna Reddekopp, I believe you were next, and if you can please state your name and your address.
Okay, I'm going to assume everyone can hear me. My name is Rhianna Reddekopp. I live at 5313 198A Street, right next to Leslie, and or Miss Schellenberg, I suppose. And I would like to, reiterate what she said about parking. She covered it so well, but one of the main concerns our neighborhood always has with regards to parking is on a nice day, when the parking is full at the park and the parking is full at the green space going into Bryden Lagoon, people are parked at the end of our driveways and up our cul-de-sac. And it's quite frankly just dangerous for us to get in and out of our cul-de-sac. And that's without the 13 units and as well those 30 units that she mentioned. So I would really like parking to be addressed in our neighborhood before we throw up more buildings and have to find parking for 50 more cars on a daily basis. I think that this is something that really needs to be dealt with ahead of time instead of afterwards, especially so the people who live in these buildings who are buying into these places just really understand what the parking is like around here and how difficult it is for everyone to find a place to put their vehicle at night. The other thing I'd like to speak on is the green space. And I know that this was spoken about already, but I took time out of my schedule to attend the advisory design panel. And on that evening, the landscape architect hired by the developer made laughing comments about how nothing would grow on the side of the on the east side of the building, which is the side that my house is on, which means that those backyards aren't going to have trees or grass or anything green. They're just going to be more concrete space, which is exactly what leads to this sort of heat dome scenario we have, as well as what Jason talked about being that on our side of the fence, all along our sides of the fence, we all use our backyards to garden. We're all in our backyards every day. And so for us to have just a heat producing, shadow producing townhouse there without any consideration to how they can soften those edges for the neighborhood is quite frustrating for us. And again, that heat dome study was very damning in terms of what the city looks like in terms of asphalt space and not enough green space. And I don't think, as far as I can tell in the design panel meeting, that has been properly addressed, with the entire back of the two fourplex buildings that are backing onto our yards really not being able to grow very much. I understand that there will be some around the sides and some around on 198th, but that back space is really just kind of dead zone. Nothing will grow there. So yeah, those are sort of the three main concerns I just wanted to be able to touch on tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, I believe our next speaker is Kirby Hanawalt. So just please state your name and your address, please.
It's Kirby Hanawalt.
Wait a minute.
Oops, my wife.
Wait a minute. Here, speak on here. Wait, you.
Is that okay?
If you mute one of the devices, it will be fine.
Okay, I'll mute my. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sir.
Okay, it's under Sandy, so that's okay. Thank you for allowing me to speak. And
Okay, hold on. Is it gonna work now?
Okay, is it okay now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. I think
okay.
a lot of the things have already been discussed that I was going to talk about, but I guess there's two things that I wanted to state. We didn't receive that notice, and I think we can look right out at the corner, so I'm not sure that notice never came to our house. I mean, we've been quite interested in this, so that's why we're on this discussion panel this evening. My big concern is I take my grandchildren over to the park all the time, and it's fascinating to me that the stop sign at 198 and 53rd is observed maybe 50% of the time. In the last couple of years, because of all the development on 198, it just seems like it's a constant stream of cars that just keep continually going through there. And stop means yield, I think, as best as I can tell. And just the other day, I was driving my car, and there was a poor fellow that was on his scooter. And a person just turned right in front of him while he was on his scooter. And both of us looked at each other and just shook our head. It's not being observed very well. And now if we put a housing unit that's so close to the corner, I fear for pedestrians. I fear for the cyclists. I fear that there's going to be a bad accident there very soon because people just do not stop. And it seems like at the rush hours that it's the worst time. And then to put a driveway about 15 feet, I'm just estimating that on 53rd, and having 13 units coming out there just does not make any sense to me. You know, I understand that we need housing, but it just doesn't make sense to have that many come out because people are zooming right along there and somebody's going to get hit. I've also noticed on 198, the driveways that come out of this new developments, people are struggling to see because there's so much parking that people are having there that they can't see, and they're just edging right out into the road. I've had to stop numerous times going down 198. So I don't think there's been a lot of understanding. I agree with everybody about the parking issue. I don't think that we're looking at traffic control. And I definitely don't think that the police have been really monitoring the stop signs. It's quite, oops, my wife hit that. It just doesn't seem like it's going to be a safe spot. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hanawalt. Next up, I believe Sage Robertson. Just state your name and your address, please.
Hi, my name's Sage Robertson. My address is 5310 198 A Street. I know that my neighbors have touched on this, but I thought I would just throw in my perspective because it's a little bit different while being on the same line. We're concerned, my husband and I, about the size of the townhouses and about the number of units that are going in that amount of space. Both him and I have grown up in Langley around this area. We've spent our whole lives here. We also spent some time in Clayton. And I know that it's kind of the running internet joke that Clayton is absolutely terrible for density, but it's not wrong when you actually live in that area, just because it's so densely packed. And it's definitely a lot of different townhouses that went up all at the same time. And they all have a high number of units in a small amount of space, which we were so happy to move away from and moved on to 198A. And now it's all coming down 198. And you can see it on 55A, I believe, as well, where they're all different townhouse complexes crammed into the same tight area. And it's the absolute amount of units that they're trying to fit into these spaces that is causing a lot of these issues where you can't see around corners, you can't pull out of streets, you can't find parking. And I think that these are just a lot of issues that are coming up because of the number of units that they're trying to put into this space. Because yes, everything's going to get developed. The OCP plan is changing, but I think that there's a better way to do it where you can at least do it with a little bit less units, maybe a little bit less height, give them double garages instead of tandem so that people are actually more likely to use them. Because as someone that was in the market looking for a townhouse, no one was using tandem garages for both cars. That just wasn't a thing. So it's just kind of a little bit of insight that you can take from other areas in the Lower Mainland to see what's happening here on our street. So thanks, that's it.
Great, thanks for those comments, Mrs. Robertson. Okay, so I'll call for a second time for anyone who wishes to speak to bylaw 3179. I don't see any.
Oh, Madam Mayor, we have another speaker.
Yeah, I see that. Rhianna Reddekopp, would you like to go again?
Yeah, sorry, I know that my neighbors touched on this, but I wanted to reiterate the safety issue, I guess. I have little kids. Lots of people in our cul-de-sac have little kids. And I know sending my kids to the park, they're just getting to be that age where they can go. And I know if this townhouse development was already there, I wouldn't be able to send them to the park because of the traffic issue, because of what's happening up on 198th, which is just really a daily struggle to not get T-boned by somebody who isn't paying attention when they pull out of a driveway, out of a street, or out of a parking spot when you drive down there. I mean, I personally never drive more than 30 kilometers down there, and it's a constant struggle to avoid being hit, like hard braking, dodging traffic, etc. It's just not a super safe place. And I know once we start to build that stuff down towards 53rd Avenue, it's just going to make that park space that much less safe. So that's the other thing I wanted to just say. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Jason, Mr. Melnick, did you want to go again as well, please?
Yes.
Yep.
I'm sure everybody else that lives around here will agree with me, but I thought I'd mention that my wife and I, we ride our bikes a lot around this neighborhood. And one thing I've noticed going up 198th Street, aside from the narrow street and the mega congestion, is the smell. Like all those people in those little areas, their garbage, it can be really abusive, like putrid, like a sanitation substation on 198th Street. Last summer when we were riding our bikes and we were up closer to Montessori there, they have the terraces developments. Each one of those units has a large air conditioning unit that sits outside. And together they all produce this kind of electrical hum. You can hear it when you're riding your bike, but I guess because all their windows are shut because they have central air, nobody inside must complain. Well, one time when we were going past there, one sounded like it was broken down and it was squealing, kind of like a fan belt on a car. It was really loud. And, we rode our bikes by, and later on that evening when we were coming back, it was still squealing. Now, I guess when you have modern homes built with proper sound suppression and whatever nobody was complaining, I suppose, or maybe they were, nobody fixed it. But over at my house, if that was one of those units were broken in these townhouses, that would keep me up at night. Like that's a really loud sound. And when you have each one of these with central air, you're gonna have 13 of them all humming. It's just something that you should think about, along with the smell, the garbage from having 13 townhouses in that little tiny area. That's it. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Mr. Melnick. Mrs. Hanawalt or Mr. Hanawalt? I'm not sure. Sandy Hanawalt has hand.
Yeah. Yes, it's
Okay, I can see the hand, but I wasn't sure if it was you or your husband. So go ahead, please.
I forgot there was one other point in the planning department documents that talked about why they were allowing the setbacks from the road, and that was to do with that the property had a curve in it, and that they wanted to set the townhouses on a bit of an angle so that this was more appealing from the street side, is what they said. I don't have the exact words here, but I'm thinking the developer knew that property had the curve in the road, and yet they're trying to put 2 rows in there. Like 1 row of townhouses would have fit perfect with yards for people and double garages. Like it would have worked really well. But it's like the developer knows all this stuff, and yet they're trying to have the city approve all these changes because they can't fit the sale of 13 units on that one property. So I forgot about that, but I think that's important when we're looking at, nothing has changed. The curve is still there in the road, but the planning department was right that slanting the building slightly did help, but that's to make it appealing to us. But I'm more worried about those buildings getting too close to the road. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Okay, so I will call for a third and final time for anyone who wishes to speak to bylaw 3179. Third and final time, if anybody has anything else to add or speak to. I don't see any hands up again. So seeing no more speakers, do any members of council have any questions regarding bylaw 3179? Okay, seeing none, we will, Councillor Albrecht.
Yes, thank you. And just it's a couple of questions I have here, but I just wanted to say that I'm usually pretty supportive of development, and the housing needs for Mitchell region is well known. And I do want to acknowledge the efforts made by the developer and the applicant to meet the concerns raised. And I'm super appreciative of the feedback by our residents regarding the application. And I think it's really important that we listen to all these perspectives to try to come up with a right balance when we're trying to meet housing needs and things for our community. So an issue that I've been struggling with on this application since I first sat in on the advisory panel is the tandem parking. And I know myself, the dynamics between my wife and I would be finding a parking spot out on the road. I wouldn't be able to deal with the tandem parking whatsoever. So that's the real honest truth from me. So I don't believe tandem parking works in a lot of situations. And I think it's something that we need to address as a council. I know we don't really have anything in our bylaws at the moment, which is disappointing. But that's something that we need to keep in mind. So I have a couple of questions, and whether it's staff or the applicant that can answer these, I would appreciate it. So I'm going to, oh yeah, and there was a good point made by one of the residents there about the new development complementing existing and the single family housing in the area and across the road. So that's something that we should always try to keep in mind when how these new developments fit into an area, especially when we know they're not going to change in the near future. But my questions are, will we be requiring a restrictive covenant to keep the garage to function as it is designed? And then my second question is, will the garage house a full-size pickup truck? Thank you.
Mr. Johansson, do you have the answer for that, or who should I refer that to?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I can answer the first question. In terms of the restrictive covenant, that's something we can look at. With parking in townhouses and even single family homes, it's always a little bit of a struggle between the automobile and storage, and having garages are meant to house cars, and unfortunately sometimes they're housing stuff. But that's something we can definitely look at and work with the applicant on. In terms of the tandem parking, Councillor Albrecht is correct. There is no regulations in our zoning bylaw right now. In terms of the scale of this development being 13 units, yes, it is 13 units, but compared to other townhouse projects, we're saying it's relatively small. So in terms of the tandem impact, staff were supportive of the tandem parking coming forward in this case. However, looking ahead at our new zoning bylaw and looking at, in terms of trying to meet housing demand and the missing middle in the city, as a part of the new zoning bylaw, we'll be coming to council with proposals looking at limiting the amount of tandem parking on sites. So that's something we're going to be considering. Now, in terms of the full-size pickup truck, that's probably something that the applicant, the architect, can take a look at. But the general idea is that those tandem magazines in those buildings should be able to fit 2 full-size parking stalls. But perhaps that's something the applicant can answer at this point in the public, or for this public hearing on the OCP amendment bylaw, or the next public hearing on the rezoning application. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Great, thank you. Any further questions, Councillor Albrecht? Sorry, my screen just
No,
moved. So I had to
Yeah,
follow.
not at this time, not at this time.
Thank you. Councillor Martin.
Yeah, thank you very much. I too would like to thank the residents for their input, and I have to agree with a lot of what they're saying. In regards to the driveway coming onto 53rd Avenue, from the picture, it looks awfully close to the corner of 198 and 53rd. And I see there's a street sign there. There's no stop sign in the picture, but how close is that to 198th Street?
I can go ahead and I'll pass that to Gordon, you the architect. I don't have the dimensions off the top of my head, but I'll pass that over to Gordon.
Yep. Hi, this is Gordon, Registered Architect AIBC. To answer the question about the intersection, the center line of the intersection to the edge of curb for 198th Street is approximately 30.48 meters. If you want edge to edge, give me 2 seconds here. Edge to edge, so curb to curb, would be about 26.48 meters.
Okay, thank you very much. So, Mr. Joe, go ahead.
And I don't know if you would like me to reply to the size of the parking space, but the parking space size is per the zoning bylaw requirements, which is 8'6" by 18 feet. We do have 12 inches around the sides of the parking spaces and the front of one parking space and the rear of the other. So it could potentially fit, I just Googled quickly, Ford F-150 length is 19.5 feet. So it could fit one of those and a regular car.
Can you open the doors?
So in front of the tandem parking, I have to agree that I know along 201A Street, there's a lot of tandem parking in the townhouses there, and same thing, a lot of the cars are parked on the street. In front of the garage door, is there room for a vehicle to pull in front of the garage door and a car can still get by if they're going to the other end of the complex? If there's only one car in the tandem parking, can another car pull up to the garage door and leave room for someone to drive through the complex?
I will again pass that to Gordon for the dimensions, but to my knowledge, no, there would not be.
You're correct, Eric. There will not be.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mr. Johansson, do you have a comment? Go ahead, please.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Just elaborating on the question about the distance of the drive aisle or the driveway coming out to 53 Avenue. That was the first thing that we checked when the initial application came in, pre-application, to check the distance from the intersection for safety and turning movements, and it was deemed to be far away enough to enable a driveway there. And it seems like on the site, there's 13 units on that site. There have been comments about it being a lot of units on the site, but in terms of traffic movements, it's relatively low to other driveway situations that might be coming onto a street. And the other couple of things just to mention is that should council move the application forward, there's a servicing agreement stage where the applicant works with our engineering side on the civil works. And one of the elements that we're looking at is actually extending the curb bulge on 53 back to the proposed driveway outlet. So that would improve sight lines and ensure that when cars are coming out, they're able to see clearly onto the travel lanes. So there's going to be no parked cars there. And also on the sight line item, the buildings are definitely outside of the sight lines. There's clear sight lines from the stop bars on 53 and 198. That's a critical thing that has to be met, and it is being met. Thank you.
Mr. Johansson, would it be safer to put a roundabout in that four-way stop there?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. That's a question probably for our engineering department in terms of, that's something they usually look at in terms of traffic warrants and the configuration of the intersection. Perhaps that could be a comment provided there. As we all know, it's a four-way stop, and the expectation is that when vehicles are using a four-way stop, that they stop and they look and then they proceed. So that's sort of what we have there. Actually, just one more item that I wanted to flag on the driveway is that another element that's been designed into this proposal is the possibility that that driveway entrance onto 53 may be closed to vehicular travel in the future. Once the properties to the north redevelop, the concept is that the driveway for this application would be connected to an application to the north, and then the traffic can then go up to 54 Avenue and access 54 Avenue and 198th Street from there. Thank you.
Great, thank you for that information. Okay, today, council have any other questions? No, I think we'll move on. Okay, we are going to move on to bylaw 3180, zoning amendment RZ 02-21 and development permit number 0321. And I believe Mr. Johansson, you're going to provide a brief overview of bylaw 3180.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor, and good evening once again, Mayor and Council, members of the audience. This zoning bylaw amendment and development permit application proposes a 13-unit, 3-story townhouse project and is parked according to our current zoning bylaw. So each unit requires 2 spaces, and there are 3 visitor parking spaces that are required as well. We, as a part of the process in working with the applicant here, there was much attention paid to adjusting the site design to push the building blocks away from the east and north property lines in order to maximize the distance between those building blocks and the existing residents to the east and help improve sunlight access and reduce shadowing impact. So this proposal aligns with the proposed OCP and an Nikomeco River District Neighborhood Plan for the area. It's located across from Bryden Park, which just recently underwent an expansion, bringing it up to a total size of 6.67 acres. And the application went to the advisory design panel on September 21st and received the support of the ADP, as we call it. The applicant has incorporated ADP's advice, namely on updating the roof lines, the roof design, adding additional facade interest along 198th Street, more varied colors, new Juliet balconies, and high quality aluminum decorative fencing along 198th Street, and also high 2 meter high aluminum privacy fencing adjacent to the properties to the east. And just to note that the shadowing convention, just so that council and our members of the public know that the typical shadowing convention is looking at the impact of buildings on usually park spaces or public spaces. In this case, we're looking at private properties. We do want to pay attention to that. The typical convention is looking at between 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. at the equinox, and that's on March 21st and September 21st, roughly. Because typically at the June solstice, the sun is high in the sky and there's a lot more solar access and less shadowing. And of course, in the winter, everything casts a shadow, a quite long shadow. So just wanted to put that onto the record. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. So I will now invite the applicant to speak to the proposed bylaw. And we have Eric Hacker from Quarry Rock Developments, Gordon Yu from Atelier Pacific Architecture Incorporated, and Jennifer Wall from Vanderzam and Associates.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, council, staff, and to everybody listening and watching. As mentioned, my name is Eric Hacker, and I've spoken before, and with me is lead architect Gordon Yu from Atelier Pacific Architecture and our landscape architect Jennifer Wall from Vanderzam Associates. Together, we will be presenting just a brief overview of Bryden Landing and it is equipped with slides. So we thank Paula in advance for helping us with all the technical aspects of this. So with that, I will pass it over to Gordon, and he can start us off.
Yep, thanks, Eric. Let me just share my screen really quickly. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. Here we go. Yep, I'll try to go through this without repeating a lot that's already been said. My name is Gordon, Untitled Pacific Architecture. Landscape consultant is with us today is Jennifer from Van der Zand Associates, and developer is Quarry Rock Developments. And this is a proposal for the proposed site at the intersection of 198th Street and 53rd Avenue, which is within walking distance to Bryden Park, Nickelmeco River, and various nature trails. The site is surrounded by single family and duplexes with Bryden Park to the west. We're proposing 13 townhomes on the site, which aligns with the draft OCP and Nickelmeco plan, as mentioned by Mr. Johansson. We are proposing 13 units divided into 3 blocks, accessed by a 8-meter interior road down the middle here. There's a common amenity, outdoor amenity here on the northeast corner, as well as visitor parking stalls here and visitor bike stalls here. We work closely with city staff to adjust the building locations to improve privacy, reduce shadowing, provide necessary fire department access, as well as to beautify the streetscape. In response to comments from the public information meeting, we've set back our buildings an additional 1.5 meters on the east property line over on this side, and are now proposing a 4.5 meter setback. And then these are the shadow study. Oh, sorry, these are just the blow-ups of the site plan. And this is the shadow study that everyone has. And then this is one of the floor plans for the blocks. So each one of the units have 3 bedrooms on the top floor and 2 tandem parking spaces within the on the garage ground floor. I just did a quick calculation for the interior widths of the parkade for this section over here. So as if you notice that one of the typical units, so let's take the middle one, we have a required full-size parking stall in the center here with the 12 inches each side as required by zoning bylaw. But then you'll notice that the garage inside bumps out and provides additional room, and the clear width on this back parking stall here is 11'2". We do have a closet in here for storage as well as one that can fit for bicycles, or sorry, 1 bicycle, sorry. As for the architectural aesthetics, we're proposing simple building forms with clean lines and bump outs to improve the articulations of the facade and to reduce massing. We're proposing a variety of finishes, including shingles, lap siding, panels, as well as our trims and canopies, all to just give a variety of textures and to create shadow lines. In terms of colors, we're proposing cool whites and grays contrasted with warmer wood tones. We've paid special attention to the elevations facing the municipal roads just to give a more interesting streetscape. Each one of the entry doors and the rear doors are given canopy features to have the building appear to front onto municipal streets. So if you look over here, this is block 1. This would be facing 53rd Avenue. As this would be facing, this is the interior side. So this is facing 53rd Avenue. So this would be the block 2 facing 53rd Avenue would be this elevation here. And then the block 3 is an interior block. As Mr. Johansson has mentioned, additional architectural features such as Juliet balconies, as well as additional windows fronting onto 198th Street. Let me just go to the rendering really quickly. Over here have been proposed, and as as a response to ADB comments, just to, once again, just improve the streetscape all along 198th Street and 53rd Avenue. And now I'll switch it over to the landscape slides for Jennifer.
Thank you, Gordon. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Sorry, I don't have my video up right now. Yeah, so as kind of been presented as well, the landscape scheme one of the key components that we've had to address moving through the process is some of the fencing concerns. So on the north and east property line, we are proposing, as per ADP recommendation, a 2-meter high aluminum fencing that will be basically solid in nature. So to have that privacy buffer between the single family residence and the more multifamily character of this neighborhood. On the east property line, there is also going to be required a retaining wall for a portion of that section. And so the fence and wall combined will maximum be at 2 meters. Which is as per bylaw requirements. Between units, we also were recommended to increase fencing heights to provide more privacy and just separate those units a bit more. So those will be as well 2 meters height, but more of a separated fence design so that you can have some more light coming through between those units as it is east facing. So you'll get some morning light and then a little bit from the south. And in that vein as well, that's kind of the intent of why we have those larger backyards, larger patios in the backyard. So you have a larger usable space that you can go out there and you can put some, potted plants out there and whatnot. And you do have some lawn space if you have dogs and children and whatnot to use that. But to maximize the usability of the space, because like was mentioned, it is going to be more of a shady area with the higher fences, but there are still lots of great opportunities there that can be done in those eastern units. Fronting 198th Street, the recommendation there for fencing was to adjust it. So we have a little more undulation in it, a little more character in it instead of a straight linear panel fencing. So we did play with the size of the fencing. So it's going to vary from 1.2 meter, 4-foot height to up to 5-foot height. And the 5-foot pieces will be actually laser cut panels. So, designed to be determined. But Gordon, if you want to pan forward a bit, we'll just kind of actually go to my probably last slide. It kind of gives some precedent of that character. So you can see in the bottom one is kind of where our details are progressing in that. So those larger panels will kind of expand sections along 198th Street and with a design that would kind of meet the character of the development. And so those panels are also proposing between the different townhome units to separate the roadside entrances along the internal driveway. And so really bringing some of that feel of nature into the site. I know with the terraces, with that project there was the attempt to put the pots and planters in that drive aisle to try to kind of create that green character and feel into that drive aisle, but it wasn't a successful attempt at that in that location and that approach. So this revise of that kind of character and feel to it, I think can really be effective. With depending on the design and panels we put forward. Also in that vein as well, we're looking to how can we make more green into this neighborhood and character, and in a development that does have, more asphalt or hardscape than what was there previously. And so, between the driveways, we do have some grade changes. So we are looking at putting these trellis systems up with metal trellises that will have vines growing all the way up them. So to give some vertical garden feel to it. We are providing a lot of trees more trees along 198th Street for those units, and where we can pocket put them in as well as street trees as well. So this kind of gives you some of the characters. You can also see the 2 fences of the taller 2-meter high fencing. So the solid one right in the middle there, the solid gray one, is the one right there on the right in the middle. Yep, that one right there is the one that would be along the north and east property line. All done in aluminum, and then the one on the middle left would be the one that would be between units. So you can see it breaking apart a bit to just kind of break up and allow a bit more permeability and some visibility through the site once you get higher up beyond the privacy level. And then you can see the character sketches or images above that kind of shows the patio feel. So we still allow a bit more infiltration of stormwater management, a bit more in there with the gravels in between the pavers. So it's not a solid concrete slab patio. We're trying allow that natural groundwater infiltration back in. And again, you can see the stepping pavers, concrete slabs coming, that long run in the grass there. That is kind of the exact character we're going to go from the units facing 198 Street and out towards the public sidewalk there. So again, not having a solid concrete walkway, but to have that break in it. So it kind of really tries to blend that landscape and sidewalk gap. And Gordon, if you can go up one slide, please. Thank you. And this is just some basic precedent images of all the plant material we are proposing to put on site. So we're looking to have a color palette of, as you can see, pinks, purples, and broadleaf evergreens. We obviously, in our approach, we always make sure we have 4 seasons of interest and are low maintenance, drought tolerant. Those are generally common practice for a lot of our most of our projects. And so that is what this palette is kind of showcasing, what would work best for the site and for the plant beds that we are showing and providing, and trees that are going to work for maybe a smaller fit or whatever, and that would still be scaled appropriately for these yards and still providing that privacy and layering as well. I think, yeah, and a lot of also we're approaching too is kind of looking at different paving colors. So it's not also just going to be all basic concrete color, you know, looking for warmer tones in those patios, using some gravels again, so you can get more infiltration in areas where you can't necessarily grow sod because of the shadows. Having a small dog area we're proposing in the northern end. Now we say dog area, but just an open lawn area. It is going to be fenced so that you can have a dog kind of run around that area briefly if you need a quick drop off versus being able to go across the park or something. So just providing green areas where we can and allowing that infiltration. Thank you, Gordon. I think that wraps it up for our presentation.
Oh, sorry.
No
I
worries.
thought you were giving it back to Gordon.
I think that wraps us up. Yes.
Well, thank you all very much for that presentation. Okay, so Ms. Kusack, can you please advise if there's anyone in attendance electronically at this meeting who wishes to speak to bylaw 3180?
Thank you,
Could
Madam
we
Mayor.
stop sharing the screen before we continue, if possible? Sorry.
We have Mr. Melnick who would like to speak.
Okay, please go ahead.
Thank you. At first, sorry, I didn't start getting names until after, but I'd like to speak to what the first gentleman said. I think he might work for the developer in sales possibly, but he was talking about the shadow study that was put forth and that it's typically done for parks. I want to remind him that this is not a park. This is my backyard, just like the other people attached to it. I don't drive a car. I don't ride a bike to it. This is where I live every day. And this shadow study that you've given me is an insult. It shows in March, half my yard covered in shade by 3 o'clock in the afternoon, while my neighbors are in complete sunshine. You need to provide a more in-depth shadow study, something that shows the impact on residential neighborhoods, not on parks. That's not good enough. And then the next thing I want to talk about is this outdoor amenity that's going to be directly backed onto my property. What amenities are there? You know, what's going to be in that location? Who would I speak to about that? It just says, you said there will be amenities on the outdoor. Well, that is directly onto our property. Like that's where my bedroom is, so what's going to be on the other side of that fence? Is it going to be something I should be concerned about making a lot of noise? If you're dropping off dogs, is there going to be a lot of crap there that's going to make a lot of smells and come in through my kitchen window, which is literally 9 feet from there? I mean, nothing's been said to mitigate that at all. And then in this last part where Jennifer talked about this nice wall they're going to be building, I mean, it's great. It's going to be a 2-meter wall protecting the privacy, which we had before when there was patio windows on the basement level and bedroom windows that were on the second floor. I mean, now we're going to have 3 floors where people are going to be looking down into our windows, and a 2-meter high fence is going to do nothing to help with our privacy at all. So you really have to consider this kind of a development in a residential neighborhood and what they've proposed and what they're giving as a reason for building it, and the mitigating things that they have to make it more attractive to the residences around it, it doesn't even come close. I don't want to live. If I knew that there was going to be a 3-story building there when I first bought this house, I wouldn't have bought it, because I wouldn't have wanted to live in the shade of that complex. I've been paying taxes for decades on this property, and I deserve better than this proposal. We all do. That's it. Anything else, it'll just get loud. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Melnick. Rhianna Reddekopp, please go again.
Hi, I just wanted to say before I start, I do appreciate the work that was put in to increasing the setbacks from our backyards to 4.5 meters. That shows an excellent sign of good faith on this development. So I just wanted to address that before. I meant to say that the first time I spoke. I have a few questions about the development. I know in the ADP, the size of the bedrooms was in contention. Are they all actual bedroom sizes? I believe Eric said that one of them could potentially have a crib, but kids grow up very quickly. And I'm not sure how big that third bedroom is. So I would like to know more information about that. I would also, again, just like to talk about the yards that do back onto ours, and in terms of what they're going to grow there. I mean, I saw the plants that they have there, and I know that most of them are full sun plants. There was some ferns. There won't really be sod. So what is going to be in the backyards is something that is concerning to me, just in terms of the heat that the building produces versus the green space that it offers. Yeah, and then the other thing that I wanted to ask about was, I have several questions, I guess. I think that Gordon said that there was a closet that could hold one bicycle. And I'm not sure who buys a 3-bedroom place and only one person rides a bike, but in our neighborhood, pretty much everybody has a bike. So these are 3-bedroom places. They would at least need to have 3 bicycles. Lots of parents with toddlers have those little wagony things that go on bikes. So I guess, like, for me, as a person who likes to be organized, if a closet isn't functional to hold enough bikes for the people that live there, then what's the point of the closet? So yeah, that would be my questions. Thank you.
Mr.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, I didn't want to step on your toes.
No, I just wasn't sure who was going to go, whether it was going to be you or Carl. So go ahead.
Yeah, we have worked or chatted with Carl and staff about the bedrooms as we left or came through the ADP as well. That was something that we chatted about. And Gordon, I know you did that directly with Carl. I wouldn't mind if you would touch on that for us, please.
Yep. So the third bedroom, which is the smallest one, is, let me just pull up the dimensions interior wise. It is 7'4" by 8'7", and it will fit a twin size bed using the measurements of 6'8" by 3'1" 5/8".
Okay. Was there anything else to answer? Or did anybody want to speak to that last comment?
I mean, I could speak to, I know Ms. Reddekopp was bringing up concerns regarding the east property line and those backyards and what that's going to look like and how it's going to grow. So thank you for bringing that up. I know your property, if I remember correctly, you back onto that area. So yeah, since the ADP, that fence line has gotten taller as per required or recommendation at the 2-meter height. So that does then impact, the sun and the shadows going onto those backyards. So, at least those patios there's nothing growing in the patios. We just have accommodate the infiltration there. People are able to bring out their pots and whatever and grow a lot of shade, loving plant material that will totally do. So obviously the biggest concern then would be the grass piece. So that grass piece as it stands right now is shown as a sod treatment. And I definitely know from experience, a lot of sod in north and eastern exposures, depending on the multiple factors, height of the building and the fencing and all those other conditions, do end up not faring well. So since our fence heights have increased, that is a condition that, you know, we still would want to provide a area that has high infiltration, and B, that does provide an opportunity for, we don't want to hardscape the whole thing. I definitely am not interested in doing that as a treatment, but provide an opportunity for people if they have their children or whatnot. Like myself, I would love to have my children just have a place to go sit on the grass or something. So there is shade loving grasses that are available, a little more difficult to work with, and you know, their success can vary, but the also alternative is ground covers that could work as ground covers that work as an broadleaf evergreen that can be used as a grass substitute. So those, even though it is called up as a sod treatment, I am aware that there are other materials that can be used that still provide that green component to those yards while not particularly being sod directly. So that is something that I would address moving forward. So I hope that answers your question.
I see a whole bunch of hands up. I'm going to go to Gordon. Did you have a comment in relations to that?
Yep, just a bit of extra information regarding the bicycle storage. So the storage we're showing currently interior to interior of the storage is 3 foot by 6'2" and a quarter. If there is multiple bicycles, and that is, I guess, very important to the buyer, they could take out the storage, because then the storage would not be structural. They could take out the storage and have a clear space of 3'8" by roughly 6'10" and a quarter. For additional bicycles to be added into there.
Okay, Mr. Johansson, did you have a comment as well?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Just wanted to note that the development is parked according to the bylaw for bicycle requirements. And just following up on the comment about the third bedroom that came out of the ADP, it can fit a twin bed. So that's been illustrated on page DP 2.0 in the architectural package. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, keeping on with the speakers, Mrs. Schellenberg, please go ahead.
Hi, I just wanted to ask Gordon if he could clarify the garage sizes. I believe he said at one point there's 12 inches on either side of the vehicle. Now, I haven't gone out and measured my car, but I don't think if there's 12 inches, I could open my door and get much more than one leg out, little alone my body. Can he just clarify that? Because I don't think 12 inches doesn't make sense to me to open a door and be able to get a normal sized adult out.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're showing the parking spaces required by the zoning bylaw, which are 8'6" by 18 feet. And that parking space is a little bit bigger than a car. And per zoning bylaw, we are to provide 12 inches on each side of that parking space size. Now that parking space size doesn't necessarily mean the car is that size and you only have 12 on each side. And further into the garage for the, let's say, for example, we take block number 2 and we take one of the middle units. So the parking space closer to the east side would actually have an 11'2" clear space. So we're showing, let me just do a quick count for you. We'll have 1 foot on one side of the parking space side and 1'8" on the other. So it would be above the bylaw requirements.
Regardless of fucking bylaw, it doesn't fit.
Okay, next speaker is Sandy Hanawalt, sorry. Please go ahead.
It is me speaking.
Okay.
Two questions. where is the garbage? And, you know, how's the garbage truck going to get into, or where are they going to go to pick it up or whatever? But I don't see the garbage designated on the maps. And the next thing is, I wanted to make one comment. That massive townhouse unit, like 100 units up on 198 and 55, there is room in front of most of those garages. I've driven around all in that area looking at what I could see that's built now. And most people have a car in front of their tandem garage. So that is probably saving some of 198's parking on the street. But the council people that have talked about the tandem garages, they need to be built with the driveway space. And I know Carl has said what you need to have in front of those garages to get a car there. So these units need to have that space in front of the garage so they can put a separate car in there. They're trying to cram too many units again on too small a space, and they need the car space in front of those garages. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Sage Robertson, you're next, please.
Hi there. I just really got hung up on the garages because, again, I'm going to talk to you. I bought here within the last 5 years, so I've been up in Clayton trying to find somewhere. It didn't work out because it was absolutely ridiculous with the density, and putting 13 units on this piece of land is a huge amount of density. The amount of space that you quoted for an F-150 to be in the garage, you're not getting in and out of that truck. So what is the point of putting it in the garage? And that's why people on the north side of 198 aren't using their garages, because they can't get in and out of their cars. So then you add in a small closet that could possibly fit one bike, and it's just, these plans don't make sense for the area. They don't make sense for people actually functionally living in their homes. Yes, development is going to happen, but it would just be nice if it was development that made sense for people that are going to live in these buildings so that they can actually have homes that are functional to them. And I think that some more planning needs to go into the development. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Okay, so I'm going to call for a third and final time for anyone who wishes to speak to bylaw 3180. I have Mr. Melnick and then Ms. Hanawalt again, please. So Jason,
Hello.
Please go ahead for the last time.
Hi. I just wanted to speak to Gordon's remarks on the point of removing structure in the building to make room for more bikes. I'd like to know how many buyers actually do this. And then you keep always coming back to it's a bylaw, it's the regulation width. When I'm in a parking spot, maybe in Save-On, I can open up my door and I can go over that line. And I'll tell you, when somebody parks their vehicle right on that line and I come out of Save-On, I can barely get in my car. I mean, barely. You go back to this saying it's a normal size parking spot. Well, this is not a parking spot. This is your garage. And there's nobody that's going to be parking their garage or their vehicle in their garage with 1 foot to get in and out every day. It's too difficult. And you should realistically look at how current residents are using this type of a space, and they're not parking cars in there. And I think you're being disingenuous when you revert back to what city bylaws are. And these outdoor amenities, nobody has answered me, what are those? You know, our properties are not as soundproof as these newer properties are. You're building things meters from our house where we hear people talking outside. What is this outdoor amenity? I need to know. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Melnick. Mr. Johansson, I believe you can probably answer that. See you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Mr. Melnick's question about the outdoor amenity, I think the landscape architect can describe that, but On the drawings, it says open lawn here and shrubs, but I think the landscape architect can describe that. And I also have just a comment about our zoning bylaw regulations after that.
No problem. Thank you very much. Yes, thank you for bringing that up again. So we do have so against your property, we would have the 2-meter high aluminum fence, and then we do have a hedge in front of that. And then we do have an open lawn area it'd be fenced off as well within there. So it does, the intent with it being fenced with a gate is to allow the opportunity with people with small dogs to come into the area and yes, allow the dogs to run around and I guess use it as a facility if they need to. Now I see that definitely from what you had mentioned, it definitely can be a concern with smells and odors and whatnot. So, I mean, other things, that is going to be a strata development. So that is definitely hopefully going to be kept under control with their own bylaws and regulations. And also we can, help that process as well by providing, the dispensary and bags and whatnot. There is also a trellis and a bench at the end of that open lawn space. But it's a very simple area. It's not also meant just for dogs as well. The only reason that I've bringing that up is that there is a gate in that enclosure, so it is an enclosed space. But it is also meant if people have kids and small enough kids, you don't want to have the kids go all the way across the road to the park, not that far. But I wouldn't want my 2-year-old. I can just have my kids kind of just go right here. My older one and my younger one to be able to go right on the development and be right there and just kick the ball while I don't know what I would do, but so it's kind of just a small little open lawn space that's open for the residents of this development. And then on the other side of closer to 198th Street of your property, there is just the visitor stalls and a more landscape buffer planting with hedge material, and as well the visitor bike parking. So that little node will be quite inactive in that space. And I also don't see necessarily the open lawn space to be highly an active space. It is a smaller area, and we do have the great park just across the road. But it provides an opportunity if people choose to take it. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Ms. Hanawalt, please go ahead.
Someone just answer that question about the garbage, where it's going to be collected there, or where it's going to be on the property.
Oh, thank you.
Yep, I can go ahead, Madam Mayor. Sorry, I see Carl's hand up there. So we do have a private garbage company that we've already chatted to about the development, and it will be per the homeowners at that time to take it out on their own. But the garbage truck and company has been confirmed. So.
Thank you. Mr. Johansson.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to note that our zoning bylaw regulations for parking spaces require 2.6 meter wide space. And that's our typical standard. That's a standard that's used in many municipalities across the Lower Mainland, and is actually probably one of the widest standards that we have. With our small car spaces, it's 2.5 meters. And it's possible that might be going down to 2.4 meters, but that's not being applied in this case. So the parking spaces are 2.6 meters plus the additional buffer on the sides, as noted in our zoning bylaw. And I think we just have to keep in mind that car widths, Honda Civic is about 1.8 meters wide. A Ford Fusion, which is like a sedan, a typical sedan, is about 2.12 meters wide, and a Ford F-150 is 2.03 meters wide. So I just wanted to make sure that it's known that when we develop zoning bylaws, there's a lot of rigor and research, and there's technical work that goes into it to ensure that these spaces are sized appropriately for the vehicles that are out there. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Ms. Hanawalt, you are the last question. Please go ahead.
I just wanted to know where the bin was going to be located on the property.
Okay, thank you.
They would be for the individual homeowners themselves, not one large bin. Sorry if I was unclear about that.
Does that address your question?
Whoops. Yeah, yes.
Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, so does council, any members of council have any questions regarding bylaw 3180? Councillor Albrecht, please go ahead.
Yes, and thank you. Really appreciate all the conversation and the feedback and the points being made. I think it's been a really great conversation. I'm just wondering about the roof treatment. The heat island effect is real. And I'm just wondering, are you doing a roof treatment to reflect the sun, not absorb it, light colors, solar panels? What have you got planned for that roof treatment? If you could fill me in there, please. Thanks.
No problem. Yep. So at this time, we haven't chatted fully about that, but we are taking all options as we move forward here. So right now, we just on the drawings had it simply put as Gordon did there in the package, but again, taking options into account.
Great, thank you. Councillor Pahal, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just have a couple of questions, and maybe some to staff and some to the development proponent. So I guess the one question I have that we didn't talk about, and I think is important about the green, and I know I hear that from the residents, it's something that's important to, I think, council as well. I lived on Duncan Way when it was first built, and I know it looked really sparse, and I was just walking there this morning, and it's almost like the street is encased by trees now. And so I'm just wondering, are we considering a street tree treatment on on bordering that property, and what will that look like? And will we start getting a tree canopy there, or is it going to be sparse? Because I know there is some examples that residents have brought up where it may be a bit trickier. So I'm just wondering what it's going to be on this property. Would it look like Duncan Way looks today in, like, say, another 20 years? And that's to maybe staff, maybe Mr. Johansson.
Sorry, that was a real hand, Mr. Johansson. Go ahead.
That's okay.
I missed it.
It's all good. Through the mayor to Councillor Pahal. As should council advance this application, like I said before, there's a servicing agreement and civil works stage. And with our street standards, we're trying to maximize the amount of street trees that we get with new development. That's very, very important to complement what's being planted on the site. And of course, we have to be mindful of sightlines, but we will do our best to maximize the street trees on the site.
Cool. And I guess to circle back, like, are you familiar with Duncan Way, Mr. Johansson? She's still there.
Yes, through the mayor to Councillor Pahal, I believe that is the street that runs west from Glover
yes.
Through the industrial. Yes, I am. It is a lot of what I remember.
Yeah, and we could accomplish that in that area, you think, with what we would propose with the servicing agreement if it goes forward by council?
Well, I don't have the exact, I can't remember exactly what the street looks like, but our standards, I can say, Councillor Pahal, that with our street sections and including with the dedication there, that's going to enable the design of that frontage to carry pedestrians in a wide public realm. And yes, definitely street trees are part of the planting strip between the curb and the sidewalk. Again, we just have to be mindful of the sight lines there. That might limit a few trees, but we definitely will be looking to do that. And I'd also like to note that, you know, the green space is a major emphasis in terms of our planning in the area. Like I said, Bryden Park was recently expanded and improved, and a Nickel plan is looking to preserve and enhance the floodplain to the south. And with that, we want to enhance the tree canopy as much as we can. Thank you.
Cool, and don't disappear yet, Mr. Johansson. There may be a few more questions for you. The second one, and maybe again, this is going to have to go to a third reading anyways, but just ask it now because it will help in maybe my decision making. So there's 5255 201A Street. there's a townhouse complex there that's 3 stories. So that's right at 53rd and 201A. And it's the closest thing I could find in the area that's similar to this proposal. And it also has single family residential, and it's been there since I've lived in the city, at least since I've lived on 53rd Avenue for 15 plus years. I'm just wondering, how does that density relate to this project? Because that'll just help give me an understanding of the scale and the impact in the community. Is that something that staff might be able to look into, perhaps? So that's the corner of 201A and 53rd.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Pahal. I can look that up right now if you give me a few minutes. Thank you.
Cool. And then while he's looking that up, just a question for the development proponent. I know one of the residents asked about plantings in the area, and I think the comment was nothing could grow there, but I was just wondering what could grow there. Again, I think you kind of mentioned some shade tolerant things, but I'm wondering if you could give more examples. And can you build something green there? Could you put a shrub there or grow a bush or some sort of thing like that in the backyard?
Yeah, no, for sure. And the comment of nothing could grow there was from way back at the ADP stage, and that was in reference to prior to the fences going higher. So now that the fence, it's not that nothing can grow there, but it's going to be a higher shade area. So there is a copious amounts of plants that can grow in the shade. So you got hostas, you got hydrangeas, you got rhodos, azaleas. Those are all, we're not designing those in these rear yards, but people can bring those in. You can bring, how good are your plants? I can start listing off a whole bunch. Pachysandra is a great ground cover, broadleaf evergreen ground cover that we can put on the bottom as the grass replacement. You're making me, ajuga is another great one. That's a broadleaf evergreen that can self-seed and spread. And sometimes you would mix these with some other ones as well. So you could get some seasons of interest in there as opposed to just a full like massing of one other plant. Sometimes vincas and periwinkles can do well in a little bit more shady. It's going to have some sun. It's not going to get lots. So sometimes they could be a bit more lay, but they can also do well as well. Although a lot of municipalities have that as a no plant zone. So I'm not necessarily going to recommend that, but those are some other the common ones that can be used. And even if moving forward, you know, the developer's like, hey, maybe we don't want to have lawn spaces. Let's make it a lush, like garden for the residents. We can do any sort of fern, western sword fern, lady fern, tassel ferns, all the fern options. You can just go on and add a layer of hydrangeas. So we can change it into a plant bed for the homeowners as opposed to a sod replacement. So there is plenty of options, and we do lots of planting in full dense shade, even underneath giant old existing conifer trees, giant cedar trees, which are one of the more difficult conditions to grow. So we don't have that condition here, but I'm more than confident for what we would plant in these spaces.
Oh, that's good to hear that there's some plantings available. And I guess another question is, there is visitor parking on site from what I can see, correct? Do you know how many visitor parking there is on site for that property?
Yeah, I can answer that. There is 2 regular visitor parking and 1 accessible parking.
Okay.
So three parking spots.
Okay, that's good. And you answered my question earlier about the 3rd bedroom. I think staff addressed the question about children's safety crossing the street there. So you said that, just to make sure I heard it right, that staff was considering reducing the parking at that intersection for sight lines. Did I hear that correctly? I don't know if Mr. Johansson's gone or not.
Gave him something else to do. He was researching it.
I'm sorry.
Yes, through the mayor to Councillor Pahal. You were referencing the existing curb bulge on 53, where the location of it is now?
Yes, because I think there was a concern that with traffic, someone might not see someone crossing on the crosswalk there.
Yeah, definitely the buildings are set back far enough to ensure that there's clear sight lines if a car is stopped at the stop bar on 53, that they would be able to see well down 198th Street to see approaching traffic and of course traffic at the intersection. And for a car that's up on the stop bar at 198th Street, they would be able to see far down 53 Avenue. I'm just looking at If you look at the architectural DP 1.0 in the drawing package, where the driveway comes out, you can see that the curb bulge is located about a car length away from the western edge of the driveway. The idea we would bring that curb bulge further east along 53 and basically meet it up with the edge of the driveway so that there would be additional boulevard there and there wouldn't be a car wouldn't be able to park there. So you'd have clear unobstructed sight lines and approaching traffic would be clearly able to see a vehicle looking to get onto the street. So that enhances the sight lines there as well.
Yeah, that's great. And I know you're looking up some stuff, but I think sort of the other thing is parking is something I know, and I know this is not necessarily about this project, but parking management, I think, is something that I've heard about. I think council is, because that's part of our new OCP, and I think a council priority is to develop a parking management strategy. That's to your understanding as well, right, Mr. Johansson?
Yes, through the mayor to Councillor Pahal, that is definitely something we are looking at to do.
Okay, yeah, and I think there's like just some of the things you look at is parking restrictions. It could be an option. You could look at, parking only for residents on a street. I know one of the residents brought up the consideration of park users parking on their street. You can, there's examples of communities where you're only allowed to park within the block where you live. Same thing for the park. You can restrict the area around the park to just park users with time limits. So I think as our community grows, it's something that's really important that we need to consider as a community to make sure that everyone feels that they're being treated equitably when it comes to parking, because I know that is a top concern for sure. And I think what Councillor Albrecht said, I mean, tandem parking, I lived in Duncan Way. I brought that up a few times. I lived in a townhouse there on Duncan Way, which is tandem parking. I recently purchased a townhouse on 55A, one of the new ones. So I know that's tandem parking as well, and the considerations that come with that. So I know it's something that we do need to review, and that's part of the new bylaw. It's something that's been in our community again since at least the year 2000, not justifying it, but it's one of those things where I think we realize that it needs to be reviewed. But to follow up, the parking size of the apartment or the townhouse I would have lived in Duncan Way with tandem parking, it would have been the same size parking, right? We haven't updated our parking size in the last 21 years, I don't think. Is that correct, Mr. Johansson? So if I was able to park a car there, we're not making smaller parking spots or smaller townhouses or anything like that. Or are we, as far as the parking?
Yes, through the mayor to Councillor Pahal. 20 years ago, I can't necessarily comment on that, but I know that our zoning bylaw dates back to 1996 and was updated again in 2001. It's gone through periodic amendments, but again, on the parking side, I don't specifically recall in my travels to municipalities and doing zoning bylaw research that parking spaces have changed. In fact, they're being brought down to be narrower, given especially in apartment zones, not so much in townhouse zones. So my sense is that parking spaces have remained relatively, the width of them and the length of them have remained relatively static over the past few decades.
Okay, that's good to know, because I would be very concerned if it was smaller than the one I lived in way back. And obviously I've looked at the one that I'm moving into as well, because that's really important as someone that's going to be a neighbor in this. Well, actually, I know a few people in the neighborhood. But anyways, I don't know if you had a chance to look at 525-201A. If you haven't, that'd be something I'd love to learn more about in third reading. And that's all the questions. Thank you. I have.
Yes, Madam Mayor to Councillor Pahal, if I may, that is a seat. Is that the 50? Is it, just to confirm the address? Is that 5255 201A Street?
Yes.
Yeah, so that site is zoned CD 17, Comprehensive Development Zone 17, and it has 18 units on site as 3 stories. And that site is about 1,500 square feet larger than this one that we're looking at today. So the density on that site at 201A Street is higher.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions from council? I don't see any hands up. All right, I just want to take this time to thank everybody for coming out to this public hearing. There was really good discussion here. It's always great when we get members of the public coming and voicing their concerns and having discussion with us. That's what we want from our community. This is community right here, and developers coming together and talking about our concerns. So thank you everybody for coming out tonight. I think we've all listened very well to what's been presented to us. So thank you. Thank you for coming out. So can I have a mover and a seconder to close the public hearing? Mover and a seconder? Councillor Albrecht, Councillor Wallace, all those in favor? Any opposed? That carries. So the public hearing is now closed. These bylaws will come forward for consideration at a third reading at a future council meeting. So again, just like to thank everybody. Have a wonderful night. Thank you for coming out. And I hope to see more public hearings like this, because it's community engagement that what makes us good about this community. So thank you.